All right, the first thing I want to show you in this Illustrator file is I want to show you a little bit about using the stroke tool and about duplication. Before I start talking about different strategies for, using scaling and overlapping and all of this stuff to actually create combinations for your different compositions, I actually want to show you how to use the tools, and then we can talk about some strategy stuff. So, first thing is first, if you remember a little bit about what I showed you before, I have my layers over here, and if you need to start where I'm starting, let's go over here to Window, and we're going to go to Workspace, and we're going to choose Reset Essentials so that you'll get something that looks sort of like this. I'm going to pull this out, and I can see the names in case you don't know the names of your different panels. You can grab your panels over here. You can also go to Window anytime you're looking for something specific and you can't find it. It's not open or something, you can always go and grab it here. So like layers right here, it pops open right there. Okay, so right now I have all my layers locked, and if you remember we had everything set up in artboards. I'm going to go down to my first artboard, which is this one. It just happens to be on the bottom of the stack, and I'm going to unlock it so that I can do stuff with it. All right, and you'll see it's got some objects in there. Okay, first things first, I'm going to go ahead and blow this up so that I can focus on my artboard. And I'm probably only going to be using mostly one artboard for a lot of these demonstrations. So this one, just so you know, is the word order. If I drag this out a little bit further, you can see the word order. Right now, I am not going to worry about these words and trying to demonstrate stuff to you. And then also worrying about, the conceptual part of this. Just so you know, that's not what I'm worrying about right now. At this moment, we're just doing tool-based stuff. Okay, so I'm going to take this object, and if I use my black selection tool arrow up here, then I'm going to be able to click it and move it around. Now, you got to be careful if you start dragging the corners. See how it changes to arrows like that whenever I hover over different parts? Okay, you see I get a double-headed arrow. That allows me to scale it, which is fine, sort of. We're not talking about that yet. Don't scale anything right now. You also get this rotation device. Again, I'm going to undo that. I don't want to do that right now, but we'll talk about it later. And anytime you need to undo something, Illustrator, let's do that for instance. Illustrator will allow you to go back as many times as it has set up in preferences, unlike Photoshop, where you can only go back once and then you have to go into your history. So I'm going to do Command on a Mac or Control on Windows, Z as in zebra. Okay, so that's a keyboard shortcut. You can also, if you don't like using one of your hands to do these shortcuts, you can always go back up here to Edit for all of those little shortcutty things, like copy, paste, that kind of stuff, right? Where you can do undo or redo. All right. So, first thing I want to show you about is the stroke. If you go over here while you've got an object selected, you'll see in your tool panel on the left that you've got a stroke and then you've got a fill. Now, in my example, I actually have a stroke on here, but I had told you not to use a stroke. So, meh, my mistake. Yours should look like that, okay? And I want you to notice, look what happened. Whenever I change the stroke back and forth, it almost looks like the size of the object itself is changing. Why is that? Okay, well, if I add the stroke back, you see the box looks smaller on the inside. If I go over here to stroke, and then you might just see something that looks like this, what you want to do is go to this little hamburger menu up here and say Show Options, and it'll drop down all the contextual information about the stroke tool, and it gives you some different options about how it's going to cap. Now, the reason that this is important might not be obvious to you right now, but when we get into a lot of really detailed stuff, later or in different classes, the way that this cap looks really does matter because of the way that your points will look whenever they end. All right, now on an object that has a closed path, like meaning that it's not a line, it's an actual closed object, it's a plane or something, right? Then this is a little bit less important. And then you see here where the corner is, the way that the corner is set up. All right, you can change your limits and change the way that you align your stroke. Now, you'll see here that right now, the stroke is selected with this middle button. If I were to change my stroke selection like that, you see what happens. It splits the difference of where the bounding box actually is, and it puts part of the stroke on the outside. This one puts the stroke completely on the outside, okay? Or it puts the line on the inside so that the size of the object doesn't look any different. And right now I can't see the difference. If I were to come over here just for the sake of illustration, okay, not because you're really allowed to use color, but if I were to double click where it says stroke right here, and I choose a color, let's just say I choose that color, now you can see more definitively what I'm talking about. Let's blow this up a little bit, okay? So you can see the relationship here where it says align stroke. This is now set to the outside, this is now set to the inside, so that the interior of the box looks smaller. Okay, but the stroke is contained within the actual space of the box, which is a lot of times what you want if you want to have something of very specific size and you don't want the stroke to make it bigger. Okay, and this one will split the difference. Okay, this one a lot of times is quite confusing depending on what you're trying to do because you can't really account for the variation of that stroke width. So I usually like to either have it totally on the inside or totally on the outside, depending on what it is that I'm trying to do. Okay, for this assignment, you're not allowed to use dash lines, but if you wanted to just see how to use it, you can explore. All right, you can click on that and you can change the point size of the dashes so that they're more frequent or less frequent. I'm going to deselect that and get rid of it though. Okay, so and then the other thing that's really important, obviously, is the weight of the stroke. So here you can adjust the weight and make it thicker or smaller. Okay, this is going to be really useful later when we start doing overlapping shapes. Okay, and the reason I'm showing you the stroke first before I start showing you things like scale is because the way that you scale sometimes can make a difference in what happens to your stroke. So now if you don't like the default integers, the whole numbers here, then you can always come and type something like 3.5 points, okay, if you need something in between. And it goes all the way down to, like, you can do 0.25, so like a quarter point of a stroke, and then it's just really, really, really fine and thin, okay? It depends on what it is that you're trying to do. A good example of when you might want to use a quarter point stroke on something is if you're doing what's referred to as a key line, like if you're printing a poster and all the edges are white, but whenever you print the poster, you need to be able to see where to cut with a cutting tool. You can do a super, super pale key line that is a point, you know, 0.25 stroke on a line or something like that. But that's not what we're doing. I just thought I'd throw that in there. Okay, so that's how you can deal with your stroke stuff. Let's go ahead and I'll go ahead and leave this just for the sake of illustration at 1 point for the stroke, and I'm going to change this back to pure white. Okay, and then if you're wondering how I just did that, let me cancel. See this box? I'm kind of going quickly. This box down here on the stroke, if I double click it, it pulls up the color picker, and then I can grab a color from any place in the zone. If I go all the way to the top left corner, that is pure white, or you could also type FFF, FFF. Pure black is in either one of these lower corners, right? And that's all zeros, 6 zeros, and it also is true for down here as well, okay? Alrighty, so let's go back to, oops. Oh, and look, see, I just changed it to white, but because I didn't actually have the box selected, it didn't actually change this particular object stroke to white. So let's select that, and now I'm going to change it over here to white, okay? Okay, and the last thing that I want to cover while we're in this demonstration is how to duplicate stuff. I've talked about it before, but I'm going to go over it again. So there's some different things whenever you duplicate that I want to really quickly discuss. One is that there is a, and by the way, you know, you're still limited to using 5 of these objects per artboard, but let's say that let's say that you start doing something a little different with your arrangement and you decide, I don't really want these over here, or you're just going to sort of like maybe move them off the pasteboard or something, or onto the pasteboard and off of the artboard to try to figure out what's happening. So if you take this and you want to start duplicating this and come up with a slightly different arrangement, you know, that's okay. But the way that you're going to duplicate stuff is there's some different options. One is that I can literally click this, I'm clicking and holding, and then with my other hand I'm going to hold down the Option key, and I can just drag it anywhere and it duplicates it. All right, I've shown you that before. I'm going to undo that with the Command Z. Now if I click and hold, now I hold down Option and now I hold down Shift, it'll duplicate, but you see that it keeps it constrained to either the 90-degree or 45-degree X and Y axes. Okay, so I can drop that, and then now I've got that. Another thing about duplicating, all right, just so you remember, is that now I've got two objects. If I select both of these objects, I can come and click and hold and drag those as well. And what's really nice about doing that is if you're trying to do something where you've got really consistent spacing, I'm going to just move this over with my click, hold, and holding down Shift. All right, if I take these two objects and then I click, hold, and then Option, Shift, drag, right, you can see that it starts to give me a more consistent kind of spacing that looks like it's a lot more ordered, right? And so that's just something to really consider. And so those are some of the ways that you can duplicate. Now, if I wanted to, let's say, I'm going to undo that. If I wanted to take this set of boxes, I can go ahead and drag that out again by doing clicking, hold, Option, Shift, and I'm going to duplicate it once. And now, as soon as I let go, while this duplicated set is actually still selected, I can immediately go and do Command or Control D, and it will continue to duplicate them over and over with the same distance, which is wonderful, right? So it gives you the same interval in between each one. Okay, so that's really cool. So let's undo that real quick, and let's get back down to, let's just say, having one box. And let's say that you wanted to do something where you had that same interval over and over again. So if I do press and hold, Option, Shift, pull it this way, right? And then I can let up off of everything, and then just do Command D while it's still selected. You can see that I've got them marching all the way in perfect interval all the way across. And then of course if I wanted to take these and I wanted to drag those down this way, right, and then I could do, right, you can see that I've got a grid of stuff. So that's kind of cool. All right, let's get back down to, let's get rid of some of these, and we will get rid of everything but like 5 of them. Okay, so now we've got our starting original spot. And we're going to move on to the next one where we start talking about scaling.